He's always been meant to lead this company, my dad said, handing my company to my brother. I left without a word. A year later, their empire collapsed. I'm 35 now, but this story begins when I was 26, freshly armed with my MBA and filled with ambition to transform my father's struggling business into something remarkable. I never imagined my own father would betray me, but sometimes the people who should love you the most hurt you the worst. My father, Robert, started Caldwell Systems in the late 90s out of our garage, a modest IT consulting firm helping local businesses troubleshoot network issues and install basic security protocols. By the time I finished college with my computer science degree, the company was barely staying afloat. Revenue had stagnated at around $2 million annually, with overhead eating most of the profits. While competitors were evolving with cloud solutions and AI integration, Caldwell Systems remained stuck in the early 2000s, installing hardware and charging hourly rates for service calls. I still remember the day I walked into my father's cluttered office, my MIT diploma in one hand and a 50-page business plan in the other. His reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of excitement, I saw resignation in his eyes, as if my ambition exhausted him. Nevertheless, he gave me a position, not because he believed in me, but because the company needed fresh blood. My brother Frank, 4 years my senior, had been nominally working at the company since his early 20s. I use quotation marks because what Frank did couldn't reasonably be called work. He'd stroll in around 11 a.m., take 2-hour lunches with potential clients that never materialized, and leave by 4 p.m. for networking events that mysteriously always involved nightclubs or sports bars. Despite this, my father adored him, always making excuses for his failures and absences. "Frank just needs to find his rhythm," my father would say after my brother's third failed attempt to land a major client. "He's a people person, not a details guy like you, Patrick." The contrast between us couldn't have been more stark. While Frank charmed his way through life with his perfect smile and hollow promises, I buried myself in code and strategy. I turned down a $180,000 offer from Google and a $165,000 position at Microsoft to save my father's company. I worked 80-hour weeks, sleeping on the office couch more nights than I care to remember. Over the next 7 years, I completely reimagined Caldwell Systems. I developed Caldwell Secure, an enterprise-level cybersecurity platform that could be customized for businesses of any size. I hired top talent from competitors, often convincing them to take pay cuts in exchange for equity and the promise of building something revolutionary. I secured contracts with Fortune 500 companies like Marriott, Johnson & Johnson, and FedEx. Under my leadership, the company grew from $2 million to over $100 million in annual revenue. What no one knew, not my father, not Frank, not even my closest colleagues, was that I was also quietly preparing for the future. Call it paranoia or foresight, but I never fully trusted that my contributions would be properly recognized. Years of watching my father favor Frank despite his failures had taught me to protect myself. The day everything changed started like any other. We were celebrating the company's 25th anniversary at the downtown Hilton. Employees, clients, and partners filled the ballroom, all riding high on our recent acquisition of TechGuard, a smaller competitor that perfectly complemented our service offerings. The deal had taken me months to negotiate, pushing our valuation north of $200 million. My father tapped his champagne glass and the room fell silent. I expected the usual platitudes about hard work and family values. Instead, what came next would alter the course of my life forever. "As many of you know, I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations," he began, his voice steady with rehearsed confidence. "It's time for the next generation to take Caldwell Systems to even greater heights." I straightened my tie, ready to accept the leadership role I'd earned through years of dedication. "I'm proud to announce that effective immediately, my son Frank will be taking over as CEO." The room spun around me. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Standing perfectly still while maintaining a neutral expression was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Across the room, Frank's face broke into a smug grin as he made his way to the podium, clapping my father on the back as if they'd just pulled off the perfect practical joke. "Thanks, Dad," Frank said into the microphone, his voice dripping with false humility. "I know I have big shoes to fill, but with the team we've built, especially the amazing developers under Patrick's leadership, I'm confident we'll continue our growth trajectory." Several uncomfortable glances shot my way. Everyone in that room knew who had built this company. Everyone except, apparently, my father. After the announcement, I cornered my father near the bar. "What the hell was that?" I hissed, struggling to keep my voice down. "Don't make a scene, Patrick," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Frank has seniority. He's always been meant to lead this company." "Seniority? He's contributed nothing. I built our entire product line. I brought in every major client." My father's expression hardened. "This is exactly why it can't be you. You're too emotional, too invested in your own contributions. A CEO needs to see the big picture. Frank understands people. You understand computers." The conversation ended there, but the real betrayal came the following Monday. Frank called me into what was now his office. The corner suite I'd been promised for years but never received. Two security guards stood by the door. On the desk lay a manila folder. "I'll get right to the point," Frank said, leaning back in his chair with unearned confidence. "We're implementing some organizational changes. Your position is being eliminated." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're firing me from the company I built." "The company Dad built," he corrected. "And technically it's a restructuring. Your severance package is generous." He slid the folder toward me. 6 months salary, health insurance through the end of the year. In return, you sign the non-compete and non-disclosure agreements. This is insane. The Caldwell Secure platform is my creation. Our clients work with us because of relationships I've built. Frank's expression turned cold. "Actually, we've received some concerning reports about your behavior. Accusations of you threatening to take proprietary code and client information." He gestured to the security guards. "These gentlemen will escort you to clean out your desk. Your access to our systems has already been revoked." As I was walked through the office like a criminal, employees I'd hired and mentored watched in shock. My father stood in the doorway of his office, now downgraded to make room for Frank, and couldn't even look me in the eye. "You always had too much ambition," he muttered as I passed. "This company needs stability, not your constant changes." That night, alone in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of personal items from my office, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into a secure server that neither my father nor Frank knew existed. The time for preparation was over. The time for execution had begun. What my father and brother didn't know, what they never bothered to investigate, was that I owned 40% of Caldwell Systems through a complex but perfectly legal arrangement. When we were raising capital for expansion 3 years earlier, I had structured the investment through a holding company I controlled. My father had signed the papers without reading them, trusting me to handle the technical details he found so boring. Moreover, I had established a separate LLC that held the intellectual property rights to critical components of Caldwell Secure. Caldwell Systems paid licensing fees to this entity, an arrangement I'd explained as tax efficiency that my father and the company's mediocre accountants had accepted without question. I had also maintained detailed records of every questionable decision Frank had made in his limited capacity. Inflated expense reports, client entertainment at strip clubs misclassified as business development. Most significantly, I had documentation of him disclosing inflated revenue projections to investors, projections he knew to be false. For the next 6 months, I disappeared from the industry. Former colleagues tried to reach out, but I remained silent. Let them think I was licking my wounds. In reality, I was building Nexus Technologies from the ground up. I leased office space in a neighboring city, recruited top talent who had left Caldwell Systems after my departure, and began developing the next generation of security software. Meanwhile, I monitored Caldwell Systems from afar. Without my leadership, the company began to flounder spectacularly. Frank's reckless decision-making accelerated the decline at a pace that surprised even me. Within weeks, he fired the entire research and development team I had carefully built, claiming they were too loyal to Patrick, and replacing them with his drinking buddies who couldn't tell Python from JavaScript. He then implemented a disastrous rebranding initiative, spending $2.3 million to change the company logo and website while completely ignoring security patches our clients desperately needed. When Marriott experienced a security breach that could have been prevented by updates I had scheduled before my departure, Frank blamed their IT department rather than taking responsibility. Perhaps his most catastrophic decision came when he impulsively acquired TechFusion, a flashy but fundamentally worthless startup, for $30 million without performing due diligence. The company had impressive DMOS, but no actual proprietary technology, something any competent engineer would have discovered in minutes. The acquisition drained Caldwell's cash reserves and brought in zero additional revenue. During a particularly notorious incident, Frank showed up intoxicated to a presentation with the Department of Defense, a client I had spent 3 years cultivating. He not only lost the $40 million contract renewal, but was escorted from the building when he started arguing with military officials about their lack of vision. The video of his removal somehow leaked to industry blogs, becoming an instant cautionary tale. Then came the SEC filing. As a minority shareholder, I had received the quarterly financial statements. The numbers didn't add up. Revenue was somehow increasing while customer satisfaction plummeted. A deeper investigation revealed that Frank had been booking multi-year contracts as immediate revenue, a clear violation of accounting principles. He had also been using company funds to finance his personal lifestyle, including a vacation home in Aspen registered to a shell company he controlled. My anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission was comprehensive and meticulously documented. I included dates, amounts, account numbers, and copies of altered financial statements. Within weeks, Caldwell Systems was under federal investigation. The day the SEC announced its formal investigation, Caldwell Systems stock plunged 60%. Clients began invoking exit clauses in their contracts. Employees updated their LinkedIn profiles, and my phone started ringing nonstop. I ignored most calls, but I answered when their biggest client's CIO called. "Patrick, what the hell is happening over there?" he demanded. "I haven't been with the company for 8 months," I replied calmly. "But I'm not surprised. Would you like to hear about what I'm building now?" 2 weeks later, Nexus Technologies announced its first major client, the very same Fortune 100 company that had just terminated its contract with Caldwell Systems. The press release mentioned that I had founded the company after leaving my position at Caldwell Systems to pursue a more innovative approach to cybersecurity. The exodus accelerated. Within a month, Caldwell Systems had lost 40% of its client base. Many followed me to Nexus. I never solicited them directly. I didn't have to. Word spread quickly that the real brains behind Caldwell Secure had started a new venture. 9 months after my unceremonious firing, Caldwell Systems filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Frank was forced to resign amid the SEC investigation. My father, his retirement savings largely tied up in company stock, faced financial ruin. The final act came when the bankruptcy court appointed a restructuring officer. As a significant creditor through my licensing company and a major shareholder, I had considerable influence in the proceedings. I offered to purchase the remaining assets of Caldwell Systems, client contracts, equipment, and the hollowed-out shell of the business my father had started in our garage decades ago. The meeting where I signed the acquisition papers was held in the same conference room where I'd been fired. My father and Frank sat across from me, broken men watching as their legacy changed hands for pennies on the dollar. "You planned this all along," Frank muttered, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The documents spoke for themselves. My signature on the final page was the period at the end of a long, painful sentence. 5 years have passed since that day. Nexus Technologies is now valued at over $1 billion, with offices in 6 countries and a client roster that includes half of the Fortune 500. Our cybersecurity platform has won industry awards for innovation, and I was recently named Entrepreneur of the Year by Forbes. Frank served 8 months in a minimum security prison for securities fraud. Upon release, he attempted to start a consultancy, but his reputation was beyond repair. Last I heard, he was selling luxury real estate in Florida, still charming, still making promises, but now to people who don't know his history. My father lives in a modest retirement community in Arizona. The money I paid for Caldwell Systems assets was enough to secure him a comfortable, if not luxurious, future. We speak occasionally, brief, stilted conversations about the weather and his golf game. He never mentions the company or Frank. Last month, I received an invitation to my father's 70th birthday celebration. I debated not going, but something pulled me there, not forgiveness, not nostalgia, but perhaps the need for closure. I found him alone on the patio after dinner, nursing a scotch and watching the sunset over the desert landscape. "You've done well for yourself," he said, not looking at me. Your mother would have been proud. I nodded, accepting the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive. I made a mistake, he continued after a long silence. With the company, with you and Frank, I saw what I wanted to see. It doesn't matter anymore, I replied and meant it. The company that had consumed my 20s, the betrayal that had defined my early 30s. They felt distant now, like reading about someone else's life. For what it's worth, he said, finally turning to face me, you were always the one who should have led the company. I was too blinded by traditional ideas about succession. I didn't respond immediately. What could I say? That I forgave him? I didn't. That it was water under the bridge? It wasn't. The damage was done, the consequences paid in full. Nexus is launching a foundation next month, I said instead. Supporting STEM education for underprivileged kids. We're holding a gala in September. You're welcome to attend. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall I'd built between my past and present. He nodded, understanding the gesture for what it was. I walked to my car in the dimming desert light. My hand was on the door handle when something made me stop and look back at the modest retirement community. Through the window, I could see my father's hunched silhouette, still sitting alone on the patio, staring into his glass of scotch. For a moment, just a moment, my carefully constructed wall of indifference cracked. A sudden urge to go back in, to sit with him longer, to perhaps find some path toward true reconciliation washed over me. My hand fell from the car door. What would happen if I turned around now? Could anything ever truly heal what had been broken between us? The weight of unspoken words hung in the air. Forgiveness, regret, the simple acknowledgement that despite everything, we were still father and son. My feet seemed rooted to the asphalt as conflicting emotions battled within me. But then I remembered the day of my firing, how he couldn't even look me in the eye as security escorted me out. How he had stood by silently while everything I had built was taken from me. The memory hardened something inside me once again. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. As I merged onto the highway, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I had lost a family but built an empire. The revenge I'd executed so meticulously had brought me professional success beyond my wildest dreams, but it hadn't healed the fundamental wound of betrayal. What I'd learned was that success is the best revenge. The true victory wasn't destroying what my father and brother had taken from me. It was creating something entirely new, something that would outlast all of us. The company I'd built wasn't just the instrument of my revenge. It had become my legacy. And unlike my father, I understood the difference between legacy and family. One you build with your hands, the other with your heart. I had mastered the first. Perhaps someday I would learn to rebuild the second. But that would be another story altogether, one I wasn't yet ready to write.